Welcome to our Cybertalks interview series. I'm Wyatt Cash on behalf of CyberScoop, and I'm here with Sami Laine, Director of Technology Strategy at Okta. Sami, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
First, I'd like to ask, there's been a lot of thrown at chief information security officers in 2020. How has 2020 really changed the trajectory of the CISO's role at organizations?
I think that they've been brought up to the forefront and more now than ever, they're reporting directly to the board, because with this massive shift to work from home and forced upon organizations, BYOD, rapid increased adoption of cloud-based services to manage the scale that they all of a sudden had to do, information security has become a true business enabler. It used to be that you were the doctor, no. Now the CISOs can't just jump to that note. They need to focus on the problem and not just think of the physical infrastructure. They really need to think about the specific threats. And your threat model may not be your adversary's threat model in this new situation. So it has required a big rethink, but it's also elevated their role quite a bit.
Well, and as you alluded to, workforces are now so much more distributed than they were just a few months ago. What concepts do you believe have helped with that shift between zero trust, multi-factor authentication, micro-segmentation, and the like?
Yes, yeah, that's a one-word answer, right? It's been all of the above, but I've seen directly within our customer base, both in the public sector, in the private industry, in large organizations that are like world scale to tiny little ones. Everybody's had to kind of shift to that zero trust principles, because if you had a business process that required your employee to be on the premise in your network in order to be able to do something, even as simple as new employee onboarding required the laptop to be first logged in on the company network. When everybody's forced to go home, that process is broken. So everybody had to rethink that. So I think that shift to that zero trust principle, saying my network zone presence is no longer the root of trust. Instead, I need to be able to move to a more dynamically assessed, full contextual authentication in everything, from onboarding to provisioning new devices to allowing people to come in from a BYOD device when their corporate issued device isn't there or it's broken. All of those shifts have really accelerated it. We had a local county government here in California that had a 2-year plan of moving more to zero trust model. And when the mandate came in to work from home, in order to give their critical employees access, they basically accelerated that to 2.5 weeks from 2 years. And so we've seen that in large organizations and small. I mean, FedEx is another one. They had an 18-month roadmap, and they went forward just in a couple of weeks, enabling all of their global employees to move more to that zero trust model, removing VPNs, going directly to application access with modern contextual control. So it's been a huge shift. And the traditional kind of thing around the zero trust, which is like, if you look back 10, 15 years ago, it started on the network, right? Instead of having one flat network, you had microsegmentation. That need really hasn't gone away. It's still there, but you're now basically like unspooling that thread from both ends. You're starting from that identity centric. How do we get people the access that they truly need right now? Focus on the zero trust, and also at the same time looking at all of the infrastructure that's more diverse than ever. How do I create that microsegmentation when some of my workloads are in my colo, but some of them are at AWS and Azure and GCP? What kind of controls can I assert that gives me ability to do that? It's been a great time to be in security, in that there's no shortage of opportunity areas for improvement.
That's for sure. And I appreciate those examples. Next, let me ask, IoT and 5G technologies continue to come online in the US, and that obviously means more tech being brought in-house to handle those improvements. But with those improvements also come supply chain concerns. So how should enterprises collectively handle those concerns and still make sure that we don't fall behind as a nation technologically?
Yeah, that is one of my personal pet peeves. I'm not sure if my employer is on board with this, but the way some of the security researchers are talking about this is that if you say that you have a smart device, you just cross out that smart and put in vulnerable instead, because collectively IoT is mostly IOC, it's Internet of Crap. if you will, if I can even say that word. There's so many systems that are being built with such little true emphasis on the security validation of that hardware and protection against abuse, that for information security professionals it's essentially a nightmare, in that you have this vast surface area that you need to now manage somehow. Now, if you're deploying this IoT in your corporate environments, you do have ability to assert some control. You can use smart, modern, next-gen firewalling techniques, making sure that all these devices go into their own network segments, and you're limiting the blast radius of the compromise. I mean, nobody wants to be the next target where the HVAC system was the pivot point for the attacker to owning your point of sale infrastructure. And that's why the modern next-gen firewalls and the cloud-based solutions like Cloudflare introduced, a fantastic set of, zero trust oriented things that just this week that allows you to put modern controls around this IoT. It's great. And 5G, it's really an enabling technology underneath all of it. It doesn't make things more secure or less secure. It just makes it easier to deploy high bandwidth systems in a more broad sense everywhere. And you don't have to have watched the supercut that showed every single time 5G was uttered in this week's Apple product announcement. I think they said it about 40 or 50 times, right? It's finally at a point where it's becoming almost as good as LTE. So it's maybe 2021 starts to be the year where 5G is realistically improving things. Right now, it's not yet. I mean, we're still on that early adopter curve where 5G is just basically more pain for everyone. But next year, the true promise of that is probably starting to get realized as the networks get more robust and scalable, which means we can now deploy sensors and technology that require higher bandwidth into places where we don't have fiber, where we don't have an ability to put those things. So I think that it's an interesting, situation. We're racing to get better controls and being able to segment these better, limit the blast radius of any vulnerabilities in these devices that truly have limited validation in most cases. I don't envy the CISOs' jobs on that, because the supply chain concerns are real. How do you validate that tech? And so much of that gets deployed by citizen IT, people helping themselves instead of the centralized manner. So it's challenging, but there are better tools coming out, and it's great to see that you'll be able to assert that control with these modern techniques of segmenting things and again limiting that blast radius. I think that's going to be the operative word.
All good points. Lastly, as cyber threats continue to grow in sophistication, organizations obviously face a persistent challenge in recruiting the kind of skilled cybersecurity professionals that they all need to protect their systems. But so how do enterprises and we as a nation really close the gaps that exist in the nation's current cybersecurity education and training landscape to help narrow those gaps?
Yeah, that becomes very quickly a policy question, and I can't so really speak to the political side of it. We know the challenges that we're facing right now in recruiting people that we used to be able to rely on, but even internally, if you look at how we're developing the skill sets, I would say that we bear a big responsibility as security professionals. We can do more in reaching out. We can do more in mentoring, in engaging with these educational programs that are available at even a community level. And at the same time, I think that we can do two things as it comes to our hiring practices. One of them is we're always looking for those unicorns. We're looking for people who have 10 years of experience in technology that was invented 5 years ago. And a lot of that recruiting profile is just ludicrous, right? So we should think about like right sizing our standards and looking for people with the right corner of that skill will matrix. It doesn't matter if you don't have a lot of skill on a specific thing, if you have the will and the intelligence to go after it. So we can hire people with less specific experience and more exhibition of interest and passion, and bring them up. But at the same time, yeah, it's difficult to hire our way out of it, because if you look at the CISSPs that are being certified these days, there are way more jobs posted today that require CISSP than there are CISSP certified professionals in the country. So it's like, there's a complete mismatch. So we also can't just hire and compete our way out of that. And I think that we can become smarter in utilizing third parties. I mean, there's a lever that you can have by leveraging, service providers that can provide services for you. You don't always have to insource everything. And sometimes leveraging these managed service providers can actually be that force multiplier that we need in the industry.
Well, Sami Laine, thanks for joining us here at Cybertalks and sharing some of your insights on a number of issues that are confronting CISOs across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.